All right, council, if y'all are ready. Good evening. Let me welcome you to the Mount Pleasant Town Council special meeting for Tuesday, January the 12th. It's after 5:15. It's good to see everybody here, especially for the reason that we're here for this special meeting. That was item number 1, is a call to order. Item number 2 is public comment. If you would like to make a public comment, please come to the lectern. We need your name and address, and we'll have the 2-minute clock, please.
Kevin Cunane, 3032 River Vista Way. As you know, I'm a former town council member. Last year, on April 27th, first I congratulate all the athletes and the parents for all your hard work that you do to get to the place where you get a championship, so congratulations. It's great for the town, it's great for your kids. The problem comes in, I have a perfect example from April 27th of last year. We had the Will Haney for Mayor Facebook page post a photograph of a family at the Egypt Road facility using the park when they weren't supposed to. Now, I don't know about the rest of the parents. I'm pretty sure I know about them, though. Nobody belongs taking pictures of kids. I don't know who took it. I'm not accusing the mayor of taking the picture. It was on his Facebook page, so he posted it, or somebody under his control posted that. Okay? That's what we're dealing with this mayor. As you know, this was not the first time he brought kids and extraneous stuff into his politics. It had to do with COVID and, oh, how dare these people congregate in the park. But I figured this is the perfect meeting to let the people affected by this know about the blue Ford Explorer that the mayor drives around for town business, just in case they happen to see him around. I think that's creepy. I don't know how much of a part he had in it, but it's creepy. And I see you writing things, Mr. Mayor. Tomorrow I'll be filing a Freedom of Information Act request to get those documents that you're writing right now, and that's fine. Your Facebook page posted it. I don't know any more than that. I do know several moms saw it. It was banter all over the moms group, and then there was 6 months of no meetings for a while. But that's just wrong. 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 Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? All right, we will move to item number 3, presentation of the Civic Pride Award. Mr. DeMora.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Mr. Gerget, come forward, please. And you all know Nicole Harvey, who's going to lead us in this discussion.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and for having us. As you know, every year, the Culture, Arts, and Pride Commission selects a local organization or business who has done an outstanding job in beautifying their outside space to make us all a little more proud to live in this beautiful town that has so many wonderful parts to it. So this year, for 2020, I just wanted to call forward McLean and Emmett Shepard from Shepard Integrative Dermatology. If you have never been to their facility, or it's over on Old Georgetown Road, like you're going to Stella Maris and Christ Our King, it is gorgeous. And I told them I take my kids to their practice, and I have lots of pictures of us walking around their little maze. Even if you don't go there as their doctors, you should go and just check. It is zen-like. And I loved her description to me was they met in California, and it's kind of based on serenity and things of that nature. And you're welcome to give a little description of that if you want. But we are so proud to have you here this evening and to present to you the Civic Pride Award for 2020 for outstanding beautification of your outdoor space, because it really is just lovely. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We love being a part of this community, and we do welcome all of you in the room and beyond to visit the gardens and walk the labyrinth and enjoy the serenity. We've created as a mission of helping community heal, and healing can happen on so many levels, and dermatology is one of them, but there are many ways in which we can be well. And I think community wellness is really important. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next item on the agenda is recognition of the 12 and under football state champions.
Hey, Kevin.
How old are these people? How old are you guys? 12. I'd like to see your birth certificate. That's right, that's true.
You know, every time I come up here, I get the opportunity to say, this is one of my favorite parts of being on town council and chairman of the recreation committee, recognizing our outstanding youth, boys or girls in their sports and athletics. And tonight we have 3 teams that are coming up before us. And it really is good to see these kids out here learning how to become adults through athletics, how to win and lose the proper way, and how to respect each other and work as a team. And that's how you get to the state championship, and that's how you win as a team. There's no one person that does it all. They work together as a team, and it just really makes my heart swell up when I see kids like this that play hard and work hard together as a team to win as a team. And so I'm gonna read a little something, and then we'll honor these guys. In a year that saw many challenges with the craziness of 2020, many sports leagues were canceled. We were excited that our kids were able to have a tackle football season in the town of Mount Pleasant. Following the regular season, Coach Belcher and a group of coaches formed an all-star team of 20 kids from Mount Pleasant Recreation Department's Mite League. They traveled to Rock Hill on November 21st to compete for a state championship against an all-star team from Rock Hill. Rock Hill may be considered Football City, USA, but our young men from Mount Pleasant carried on a tradition of winning with character with them as they defeated Rock Hill 26-6. During the game, William Donato completed a touchdown pass. Josh Amara, Joey Harriet rushed for 2 touchdowns, and Michael Strickler returned an interception for a touchdown. It was a total team effort with the dominant defense keeping Rock Hill out of the end zone until the last minute of the game. Congratulations to the coaches, the players, and to all involved, and the parents as well who was there and taking them to all the practices and being at all the games supporting them. So let's give them a nice round of applause.
Can we do a photo? Can I have you all kind of lined up in a few different rows back that way?
Y'all kind of stagger, so get one row behind another row, tall guys, come get them back. Short guys, face this way, turn this way.
Perfect, guys.
They gonna hide me, I gotta get somewhere.
All right, everybody make sure you can see the camera.
Just in case I'm in it.
Perfect, thanks, guys.
Good job, guys. He's totally sick. Well, there's 2 more things coming in. You can do it for them.
Yes, but we're in the right color.
Good job, guys.
Nice job,
Good
gentlemen.
job, thank you.
Got it, guys.
Hard work works.
Thank you very much,
Thank you so
Coach.
much.
Hey, sort of green plaid shirt.
You're welcome.
You walking out? Welcome. Who's up here with him? Kevin.
Oh, really? Okay.
He's over there too.
You're welcome.
National Guard in the 218th MD that I work with.
That's where I won my second state championship, was in Rock Hill. Believe it or not, beating North Charleston. Hey, Chris.
Mr. Santos coached me when I was.
All right.
That's Donato, isn't it? Yeah,
Should be.
we know his dad.
I coached him when he was 10.
Yeah.
I've been informed that the swim team is not here, so we'll be going to item 6, recognition of the Lucy Garrett Beckham High School girls varsity tennis team state champion.
Coach,
Led by coaches Liz Coates and Michelle Kraus, the Lucy Beckham High School girls tennis team competed in Region 7-4A and finished the season with an overall record of 14-0 and had a winning record against all of the other local teams. The team won 10 straight regional matches and entered into the playoffs, defeating Myrtle Beach, Florence, Hilton Head, in order to compete in the state championship. Our Lucy Beckham team won the state finals against Greenville High with a decisive score of 5-1. Our number one player, only a 10th grader, Piper Charney. You can raise your hand, Piper, if you're here. Oh, she's not here. Went on to win the individual state tournament. And a number two player, only an 8th grader, Ella DeFord. Are you here, Ella? There you go. Took third place in the individual tournament. Congratulations to our varsity champions at Lucy Beckham girls tennis team. Let's give them a nice round of applause.
Go ahead, you guys turn around so I can do a quick photo.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Way to go, girls.
See you later.
Way to go.
Way to go.
Nice job, ladies.
Hey, now, sore subject.
I know the mayor mentioned that the Wando girls swim team wasn't here, but I want to read a little something for them anyhow. This team was able to compete in the 2020 season due to everyone's dedicated hard work and following the safety procedures. Led by 2020 Region 7-5A Coach of the Year, Cheryl Durden and Mackenzie Nash, the team had resounding victories against their region opponents. They claimed the 2020 Region 7-5A championship with 25 swimmers claiming all region honors, and Sophie Fries was named Region 7-5A Female Swimmer of the Year. The 5A state championship was held for the first time at the new North Charleston Aquatic Center. Wando had 13 girls qualify for the state championship. Estelle Bauer won the individual 500 freestyle, and it was a strong team effort to pull out the victory by defeating the closest opponent, Spartanburg High School, by 26 points to win their fourth consecutive 5A state championship. Congratulations to all of our state champions and the Wando girls swim team. I'd like to thank our recreation department for allowing the swimmers to use our pool up in Park West as well. That's where a lot of them train. That's where a lot of them get their practice, and it's nice to know that our town recreation department helps out the local schools in order for them to become state champions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Gary. All right, that takes care of all the items on the agenda. Item number 7 is to adjourn. So that having been accomplished, we will stand adjourned until our regular council meeting at 6 p.m. We're adjourned.
I'd like to.
Yeah, like just keep rolling.
Yeah. I think, thank you. Oh, what's his name? Warren Player? Warren's a landscape architect. What's that?
We'll go up afterwards and get it, take it home. I do it.
Just give me your proxy on every vote, and you can lay it. There you go. We're legal? All right, is staff ready? Council ready? We will get going here. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, January 12th, 2021 Town Council meeting. It's good to see everybody here. As printed on our agenda, we are in compliance with Executive Order 2020-73, where occupancy has been limited to 50% in the chambers. Our agenda has been published, and everyone has that. We will begin with the prayer by Chaplain Bonnie Torrance, and then the pledge led by the Mayor Pro Tem, Tom O'Rourke. Please stand.
Please pray with me. Dear God, I come to you tonight, and I pray that you will help us to rejoice in hope, to be patient in tribulation, and to be constant in prayer, just like it says in Romans 12:12. I thank you, God, that you are a way maker, a promise keeper, and a miracle worker. I thank you, Father, for the town of Mount Pleasant. I thank you for the leaders that are here tonight as they gather to lead. I pray, Father, that you will give them wisdom, insight, and creative thinking. I pray for unity and for courage in their lives in order to make the right decisions and to stand for the right things. I thank you for all of us here in this room tonight that have the opportunity to live here and to serve here. I pray that you empower each one of us to love our neighbor as ourselves and to seek out the good in every person we meet. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 3 is approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion, a second. Any discussion? All in favor of approval of the agenda as published, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The agenda is approved. Item number 4, public hearings, awards, and presentations. Item A is a presentation on the economic impact of the Crab Bank Restoration Project. Mr. DeMora.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, members of council. This is to speak on item A, which is the economic impact that has been produced for us by Dr. Von Nessen, who will speak momentarily. Before he does, I want to take a moment to recap where we are and how far we've come and what the issue is here with the Crab Bank Restoration Project and what we face. And as you can see from the aerial that's in front of you, if you look at the white checkered images here on the screen, I'm highlighting it in blue, drawing a line through it. You can see where the original Crab Bank was placed back in 1959. And it was not placed there to be a rookery. It was just simple spoil material placed on this side of the Charleston area. And what's happened over time, you can see that it's drifted. and it's drifted northward towards the mouth of Shem Creek. And so over the last 50, 60 years, nature has shown us what happens to the sediment once it's placed near and around Shem Creek. The next slide here will show you alternatives, and alternatives that have been proposed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, their original proposal, in fact, an alternative that they delivered to us sometime after the town had voiced some concern. And then in the blue checkered, the blue dotted line, the preferred placement by the town of Mount Pleasant. And as shown on the prior slide, with the movement north over the course of time, that the original U.S. Army Corps of Engineers placement shown in red threatened to further choke the creek over the course of time. Certainly, I don't need to stand here and mention to you the importance of Shem Creek. You already know that, how important it is for those who rely on it to make a living and for enjoyment by our citizens. And so when we became involved in this project, in this process, the Army Corps moved the line a little bit further down, this black checkered line here. And that's a movement south towards the direction that we prefer, but it hasn't been far enough to mitigate the type of impacts that we foresee coming in years ahead. In fact, we brought in our own team of scientists. You may recall the meeting when this was authorized, to run models over the course of time, over a series of years. And through those models, what was demonstrated was that the preferred placement of the sediment was this sort of eyebrow, upside down eyebrow looking area there in blue. And so that is our preferred placement. That's where we would like for this project to be. The town does not oppose the restoration of Crab Bank, but we are looking for a more preferred placement than what has been brought to us by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. As I showed to you on the prior slide, where Crab Bank has drifted to the north, it doesn't take many scientists to actually show what happens over the course of time here. But one can easily see that while this was 350,000 cubic yards dumped back in the 1950s, that we are in danger when more than twice that amount gets dumped in just a few months from now. If we could go to a video that I have here next. If you could play that, please. What this is going to show you is at low tide, the danger that we are facing. This particularly from a public safety point of view, as you see motorized vessels along with recreational type boats, and how they converge over near Shem Creek, and see how shallow it has become, to the point where you just noticed a moment ago there were individuals standing just a few feet from Crab Bank itself. Now, while that is important, you should know that the restoration project fails to achieve its objective if it becomes attached to land in any way. At that point in time, you have predators that can now access the rookery and no longer operates as a rookery. So our preferred placement, the town's preferred placement, that, by the way, the town of Mount Pleasant is the only entity that I'm aware of who has even studied the long-term impacts of the movement of the sediment over time. We're the only entity that has done that. And the placement, as you see here in the blue, towards the south, guarantees the life of the rookery and further protects Shem Creek. So, as we venture forward, I showed to you the video. As we moved on in this project to collect even more information, show it to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and their state partners as to what we're facing here as a community. We have everything to lose here in the town of Mount Pleasant. As to what we're facing, we went ahead and also secured Dr. Von Nessen to produce for us the economic impact if such a project were to occur, and what we can expect going forward as sediment continues to choke the mouth of Shem Creek. So let me go ahead and introduce to you Dr. Von Nessen. It's my pleasure to do so. Dr. Von Nessen is a research economist at the Darla Moore School of Business. He specializes in regional economics and regional economic forecasting. He regularly conducts a wide variety of economic impact analyses and feasibility studies and independent market research for clients both in the private and public sector. He has served as lead researcher on projects with clients as diverse as Sunoco, Blue Cross and Blue Shield, Michelin, Boeing, and the Savannah River National Lab, among others. Dr. Von Nessen is also responsible for the preparation and presentation of the University of South Carolina's annual statewide economic forecast. He serves on the advisory committee of the South Carolina Board of Economic Advisors and is regularly invited to brief the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond on economic conditions in South Carolina. Dr. Von Nessen is also a member of Resch Marketing Consultants, which is a full services market and economic research firm. So if you please join me in welcoming Dr. Von Nessen, if you'll come forward, please, sir.
Well, good evening, and thank you again for the opportunity to present this research to you this evening. Many thanks to Eric and to all of you for inviting me to present the work that we have been conducting over the last several months, looking at the economic impact of creek shallowing on the community of Mount Pleasant, on the town, and also on the waterfront district as well. And so what I want to do is just spend a few minutes going over at a high level the main results of the research that we have conducted, and then I'll be happy to take any questions that you all have. So starting out, I think it's important to just recap really the research question that we're really trying to get at here, which, as I mentioned, to look at the economic impact of the natural shallowing that is expected to occur over the next 5 years at Shem Creek. And the way that we do that is to actually go and survey businesses on or near Shem Creek to evaluate what their projected adverse impacts would be over the next 5 years, and then use that baseline data to then estimate what the total economic impact would be, both for the waterfront district as well as for the town of Mount Pleasant as a whole. So that was our overarching process and research question, what we were trying to assess in this project. So just some quick data summarizing Mount Pleasant as a whole. You'll see here the population of Mount Pleasant currently approximately 93,000, which represents roughly 22% of Charleston County. Within Mount Pleasant, we see a total employment base of approximately 71,000, and that spans across about 10,000 business establishments in Mount Pleasant as a whole. Now, when we look at the Shem Creek Waterfront District, we identify that based on the town's definition of this parcel set that you see here in the slide, which represents about 185 business establishments within the parcel set, again, that were identified by the town, that we wanted to look at, survey, and assess what their projected impacts would be over the next 5 years due to creek shallowing, and then use that information again to assess what the total economic impact would be to be able to quantify that specifically. So when we actually go and survey these businesses that are, again, on or near Shem Creek on that parcel set, these are the results that we see. First of all, we want to look at the types of business establishments in terms of their industry composition. And you can see here the main categories here. Notice that about 50% of them reflect business types that would likely be impacted by shallowing of Shem Creek over time. So you see 3 primary categories here: commercial fishing and shrimping, along with leisure and hospitality, a variety of businesses there, and then of course retail trade as well. So about half of the businesses within these 3 categories that we would anticipate possibly being significantly affected by creek shallowing. And then we can look at the employment distribution as well. And we find that there's even more concentration within these business categories if we look at the employment size, where you notice that about 86% of the total employment in and around Shem Creek are concentrated within these types of businesses, within these industry categories. So about 86% of the employment concentrated here, about 50% of the business establishments concentrated, again, within these industry sectors that are likely to be impacted in some way by the creek shallowing over the next 5 years. So how do we actually go forward and survey these businesses? What are the results? What do we see? What is their feedback? Well, this slide does a nice job of encapsulating the basic questions that we asked to these businesses to assess what the likely impacts would be to them. So you can see just, again, some basic responses that they were able to provide to give us a range of possible impacts, from being positively impacted for a variety of reasons to being negatively impacted to different degrees. And you can see that we looked at different stages of shallowing, so 2 feet, 4 feet, and 6 feet over the span of the next 5 years. And these categories were based on research that we've already heard Eric speak to in terms of what the projected natural shallowing will look like over the next 5 years. And when we dig into these data and actually look at what the main conclusions are, there are basically 3 major takeaways that come from these survey results that you can see here. First of all, between about 40 and 55% of all business establishments report that they would be adversely affected if we were to see Shem Creek become shallower by between 2 and 6 feet. So the current projections are for natural shallowing to result in about 6 feet of shallowing over the next 5 years, and about 55% of all businesses reported that they would be adversely affected. A significant percentage said that they would be substantially adversely affected. 36% said they would be impacted by more than 25%, meaning more than a quarter of their business would potentially be at risk if we were to see shallowing of up to 6 feet. The other major finding here, when we look at these results, is that the fact that between 40 and 55% would be negatively impacted also means that roughly half of all business establishments said that they would not be impacted in any way. And in fact, that's exactly what we see when we look at the results. So it turns out that there's a strong dichotomy here in the results, meaning that we see most business establishments self-reporting that they would either not be affected at all or be affected significantly. So there's not a whole lot of middle ground here. Not many businesses saying that they would be affected, but affected by a small amount. Again, either not affected at all or affected fairly significantly. One other aspect that we wanted to look at was their specific reaction to weighing the effects of Shem Creek shallowing versus crab bank renourishment. So we wanted to provide them an opportunity to provide some specific comments weighing those two. And the bottom line here, when we looked and examined these responses, was that most survey respondents see a trade-off here. They see a trade-off between crab bank renourishment and between the economic considerations, the economic health of the waterfront district. They recognize and value both, but on average, the survey respondents suggest that the economic considerations take priority. And you see here one specific quote, which I think does a good job of encapsulating this perspective. I think crab bank renourishment is a worthy act, however, not at the expense of Mount Pleasant businesses. Now, of course, everyone did not have that perspective. There are a variety of responses, which you can see in the full report, but this is an accurate depiction of the average response as a whole. So when we survey the residents, we get a bit of a stronger perspective. So we looked at not only the business establishments, but also residents in the area. They were much more strongly in favor of the economic side of the equation, and very much concerned about the creek shallowing and its adverse effects on the community. But primarily in this case for 2 reasons. Number one, they were concerned about property values, and secondly, the recreational components of the use of Shem Creek. So both of those weighed heavily on the resident side. So very different reasons, but again, they were much more united in terms of their perspective relative to the business community as a whole. So what does this imply for the economic impacts as a whole? Those are a high-level overview of the survey results themselves. We also want to look at what this implies for the economic impact when we actually go in and model this, both for Shem Creek, for the waterfront district, and for the town of Mount Pleasant as a whole. And just very briefly, economic impact analysis, what is the baseline methodology for how we evaluate such a question? Well, anytime you're looking at economic impact analysis, there's essentially a 3-step process here that we can summarize. First of all, we look at initial changes in economic activity. So in this case, this would be the reported disruptions by the business community, the self-reported business disruptions by the community, what they project over the next 5 years. And so that, of course, is going to be losses in general, on average, that they are expecting to see, so reduced business activity as a whole. That translates into reduced total local spending, as you see here, and then we can actually quantify what that looks like, both the primary and the secondary effects, or the economic multiplier effects, as they're often called, and we can quantify that in terms of impacts to GDP, so local economic activity, job losses, and income losses. So a very straightforward process going from these primary effects of the businesses themselves to the secondary effects, all the suppliers, all of the wages that are not earned when businesses have to cut back, and the secondary effects of those being spent in the local community. And again, we quantify those by these three basic measures. So what are those actual estimates? Here's an overview of what those look like. We also have estimates for the shallowing when it reaches 4 feet, which I'm not displaying here, but that's available in the report. But the main findings I want to focus on here is that second chart at the bottom of the screen, 6 feet of shallowing, which will occur, or is estimated to occur within about 5 years. And you can see here that the expected total losses could be up to $126 million. That is an annual number, and that's associated with about 1,432 jobs for Mount Pleasant as a whole, for the town, that would likely be lost if we were to see creek shallowing of 6 feet within 5 years, based on the projections made by the businesses themselves, the survey respondents. Now, what does that mean in terms of perspective? What is $126 million? What is 1,400 jobs? Well, we can summarize that as well and just provide some perspective on what that means for the community. For the Shem Creek Waterfront District, that is anticipated going from 2 feet to 6 feet to represent about 19 to 30% of the business community, of the economic activity as a whole in the Shem Creek Waterfront District. For Mount Pleasant as a whole, not quite as large, of course, because Mount Pleasant is a much larger region. It's estimated to generate a loss of about 2% for Mount Pleasant as a whole. But especially when we're looking at the Waterfront District in Shem Creek, we see that there is a significant potential for some adverse impacts over the next 5 years. So quickly, just the bottom line, summing up, we see 6 feet of creek shallowing over the next 5 years as being the natural progression based on other research that the town has had done. And such sedimentation, if we do see this shallowing, would likely or potentially be exacerbated by the current plans to restore Crab Bank. And so what we are seeing is that about half of businesses are reporting that they would be negatively impacted by creek shallowing, but there is a dichotomy. Again, about half would be negatively affected, and significantly so, about half telling us that they would not be affected at all. And when we actually look at the total economic impact, it may be as high as $126 million by 5 years from now, when we see 6 feet of shallowing, which is associated with about 1,432 jobs. And again, that represents up to about 30% of the waterfront district, about 2% of the Mount Pleasant economy as a whole. And then finally, this is, I think, an important point to reemphasize that most survey respondents do perceive the trade-off between the two and recognize and value both. They value preserving the economy of the waterfront district as well as Crab Bank. But again, on average, if we look at the average respondent, they tend to weigh those economic considerations and consider those more important. Again, on average, every respondent was different, of course. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions about any part of the report, I'll be happy to take those now.
And if I may, our action item on this is item 10A1. That's where we'll be voting, but if there's any questions, now would be the time to ask, Doctor. And we want to thank you for your work. Thank you for your report to council as well.
Thank you.
Council members, any questions? I know that most of council was in our joint committees when this was done, and we asked a lot of questions in case people are wondering why there are no questions. We already had one shot at this. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Doctor. We appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This brings us to item 4B, public hearing to receive input regarding the US 17 to Rifle Range Connector Road. Mr. Morrison.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a required public hearing for the US 17 Rifle Range Connector Road. And just as a matter of history, we've been working on this project for about 3.5 years now. It is funded in our CIP. The primary purpose of the road is to really open up the connectivity in the northern area, start connecting to our new Billy Swales Boulevard as well as Rifle Range Road. That'll disperse the traffic within the network. So really one of the most important projects along with Billy Swales Boulevard that the town has. Specifically, the improvements include a two-lane road. It's a divided two-lane road, and it has turn lanes at the major intersections, including Billy Swales. It's landscape median. We have a multi-use path, 10-foot multi-use path for the majority of the project. And it also, obviously, if anybody's familiar with that area, it'll provide access to the town's active park as well as Charleston County's passive park, which is the Rifle Range Park. Funding comes through several sources: accommodations tax, transportation impact fees, and the general fund at a cost of about $10.6 million. And we are currently in the right-of-way acquisition phase. That will go on through August, but will overlap procurement and bidding process starting in the spring and summer so that we can be under construction at the end of the summer in August. And then that'll be about a 14 to 16-month construction project. And if anybody sits in our monthly meetings, this should be familiar. This is the entire road project from 17 all the way over to Rifle Range Road. So a public hearing to receive comment that is mandatory by our public process, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much. And this is a public hearing, this section of our agenda. If there are any comments, did they sign up here or?
No one signed up to speak, sir.
What's that?
There was no one who signed up to speak.
Okay, no one signed up to speak. If you would like to speak to this project, now would be the time. Any public comment on this public hearing? If not, I have to gavel the public hearing closed.
All right, thank you, Mayor.
Going once, this public hearing is closed. Next is another public hearing to receive input on the recommendation of the Historic District Preservation Commission to designate properties as listed and published as historic. Mr. Ulma.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yes, this is an advertised public hearing required under our zoning ordinance, where 35 additional properties have been studied and recommended as contributing historic properties to the Old Village Historic District. This comes about because our zoning ordinance was changed in 2019, and it shifted the eligibility time period from a fixed date of properties or structures built 1936 and earlier to a rolling 50-year time frame. And so that opened up the opportunity to look at additional properties. We did have an existing inventory and historic survey, and using that, the staff and your Historic District Preservation Commission, they have applied what's set out in the ordinance in terms of criteria for designating properties as historic, and you have a draft resolution that lists these properties under item 8A4. These are the various criteria that can be used to designate a property as historic. They come right out of section 156, 432B. The currently designated properties are shown here in blue. So those are all existing properties that have previously been identified and designated as contributing historic properties. The recommended ones are those shown in gold. And this is the list of properties that's been included on your agenda and in the advertisement. And I will turn it over to you, Mayor, to conduct the public hearing.
Thank you very much. As advertised, this is public for public comment. Don't know if anyone has signed up. If they did, we'll hear you now. And if you didn't sign up, you still have the ability to speak after those who have signed up. Mr. DeMore.
Linda Balzac.
Where to get this off? Okay. Hi, I'm Linda Balzac. I'm an architect, and I'm working for the homeowner at 704 Pitt Street, which is the old ice house. And Thomas can't be here tonight, but hopefully he's watching on YouTube. We respectfully request that 704 Pitt, also known as the old ice house, be designated non-historic. Multiple renovations and additions over the years have turned the building into a private residence, has also made it almost unrecognizable. The only remains of the original structure are the 18-inch thick masonry walls. These original walls were solid to contain ice, with one opening at the rear loading dock. Many doors and windows were added to these walls. Front and rear additions also cover most of the original structure. A National Register survey was done in 2010, and it declared the structure to be non-historic because of its age, which was 1960. And 1960 actually refers to the additions and renovations, not the ice house itself, because it's mostly covered up, so they were just looking at the new stuff back then. I served on the Town Appearance Commission back in late 90s, and I've done most of my work in the Old Village. It's my passion. I used to live there, and I've done at least 32 historic properties, and they are my passion. And I've reviewed this one. I have a number of photos, and it's so little visibly remains that it's just gone beyond the point of any return. So I'd please accept our request to make 704 Pitt non-historic. That's it.
Thank you.
It's the biggest crowd I've ever talked in front of.
That's all I have, sir.
That's the last one?
Yes, sir.
Anyone else to speak? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hamlin O'Kelly, Buse, Byers, and Taylor, 652 Coleman Boulevard. I am here for the owners of 627 Pitt Street who live out of town and cannot be here tonight. Of course, your zoning ordinance did change to make it a sliding scale. Things that are 50 years old are now considered historic. I will be 50 years old in 2 years, so it comes as a bit of a shock to me that things that were built in 1972 in 2 years will be deemed historic. As the prior speaker just stated, we would request that 627 Pitt be removed from this ordinance. This is one of the old properties that was part of the base on Sullivan's Island. It got moved to 627 Pitt Street. There are numerous structures within the old village that were part of the old base at Sullivan's. This property was built in 1947. It would qualify under the old ordinance and the new ordinance. Unfortunately, it's not that great of a property. If you were to go look at it, the folks who bought it are planning on rehabilitating it, adding to it, and making it more of a residence. As I understand it, having gone before the Historic District Commission many times, there'll be more hoops to jump through, which will sort of make it more difficult for them to do what they plan to do with the property. Of course, we all buy property subject to zoning, knowing that it can change at any time. But this is our one chance to be heard, so we would ask that you remove 627 Pitt from the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamlin. Anyone else to speak to this public hearing, item 4C on our agenda regarding Historic District Preservation Commission designations of historic properties? Anyone else? There being none, I am required to gavel this public hearing closed. This moves us, if you go over to page 3, to a medical community update on COVID-19. We have our lead presentation this evening is from the Medical University of South Carolina. And I'm not sure if any of the others have showed up, not that we need more. If you would like to come forward. And we'll be seeing a video presentation by Dr. Lacey Menken-Smith, who is with the Medical University. And so if you would kind of introduce this for us. And this is to give us, we're at a new phase now. Vaccinations are out there, and there's been lots of information after the holidays. And it was a good time to sort of get everybody the same information at the same time. So thank you very much.
Have everything up. Good evening, Mayor, Town Council. What an honor to be before you at the beginning of 2021. My name's Ryan Taylor. I work with Dr. Menken-Smith. We actually met in the emergency room. I was a nurse there for about 2 years. And then when COVID hit, Dr. Menken-Smith, myself, and several MUSC leaders responded to the need across South Carolina to help out the economy, work with businesses, find safe ways to open a business, open our school system, and help people function safely. So since April, my life has been COVID. I've answered quarantine questions and contact questions and how do we make this safe? Dr. Menken-Smith is going to do a really, really nice job presenting where we are currently, what MUSC has to offer, what we see as updates, where we see the current risk levels being. I don't know about you guys, but I am very ready to be able to walk up to somebody and give a good South Carolina hug. That's what we do here. We hug people. It'll be nice to see people's faces and to smile. But a little bit longer. We're excited about vaccinations. Things are changing just about every second of every day. Today we were comparing it to the Wild West because we feel like there's always a change and always, another lasso coming around the corner. But I'll be here to answer questions as Dr. Menken-Smith's presentation ends. I don't have all the answers, but I've answered a lot of them, so I hope I'll be able to respond to any questions you guys have today.
Hey there, my name is Dr. Lacey Menken-Smith. I am the Associate Medical Director of the Emergency Department at the Medical University of South Carolina, and I am also the Medical Director of the MUSC Back to Business program. I wanted to say thank you to Mayor Haney for inviting me to give this presentation today, and thank you to all of you for your conscientiousness and involvement in the health of our communities. I think this is a really important topic to be discussing, especially right now. Just a brief overview of some of the ongoing epidemiology in the United States right now. So we have seen a spike in the total number of COVID-19 cases recently across the nation, but at this point we are over 370,000 deaths in the United States. If you do some statistical modeling and look back at deaths over the last 10 years, there have been nearly 300,000 more deaths in the first 10 months of 2020 than you would typically expect in previous years, and 2 out of 3 of those were attributable to COVID-19. Here in South Carolina, we have had over 315,000 positive cases with greater than 5,000 deaths. And what's important to note is that what we've seen over the last several weeks is that we're having a steep increase in the number of cases, as well as the total percent positive of those who are being tested in South Carolina. So as you can see, numbers are significantly higher than the peaks that we saw back in July. In the last week, we've had several peak numbers for the state during the entire pandemic. So we had a record number of cases per day at nearly 5,000. We also have seen peak number of hospitalized patients with COVID-19, and the number of hospitals in the state of South Carolina, which have hit greater than 90% capacity, has also peaked within the last week. Charleston County, like the remainder of the state of South Carolina, is still experiencing high incidence of COVID-19 at 545 cases per 100,000 individuals. So anything greater than 200 per 100,000 is considered high incidence. So we are more than double that. Importantly, our growth rate is extreme. So as of the 7th, we were considered in the red by the MUSC Epidemiology Project. So there was a greater than 23% increase in the number of those infected within the prior week. The 7-day average had increased by 32%. And the reported total number of cases had increased by 43.1% from the week prior. The good news is that we still have good testing capability in Charleston County, and our turnaround times for test results remain within 2 days from when the sample is obtained. What I'd like to point out here, and I think this is the most important thing to get from this presentation, is if you look at that gray line, what we're seeing is steep increases in hospitalization of COVID-19 patients. So on the 8th, we had 2,396 hospitalized COVID-19 patients, with about 10% of those who were on ventilators. At that date, 27 South Carolina hospitals were at greater than 90% capacity. And I've listed them out here, but that represents about 1/2 of the hospitals in the state of South Carolina. If you look down to the Charleston area, we are also experiencing high hospital utilization rates. And currently within Charleston County, we're seeing growing number of hospitalizations. However, we remain within our capacity to manage those admissions. Charleston area also has been seeing high numbers of nursing home outbreaks reported by DHEC. As far as vaccines go, it's very important that if we are ever to get this pandemic under control, that we have wide uptake of vaccination. MUSC Health has received the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine, and at last report, close to 64% of Charleston MUSC employees had been vaccinated. Also, as of today, we've opened vaccine scheduling for individuals over the age of 75. They can self-schedule at that website link that I've listed there for you. And DHEC is also listing on their website all of the available vaccine sites. I expect that within this week, we will see an expansion of who qualifies for the vaccine. And so I anticipate an update from DHEC in the very near future, expanding that. I've gotten my vaccine, and I highly, highly encourage each and every one of you to get yours when it's available to you. So I just wanted to quickly remind everyone of the scientific evidence, which is very strong for the effectiveness of the following risk mitigation behaviors. So wearing a mask, keeping a distance of 6 feet or more, avoiding crowds, washing your hands frequently, and decreasing indoor gathering. I just wanted to say, I know that oftentimes these numbers, when they're reported at an epidemiologic level, can be really hard to contextualize. And so I wanted to let you know, as an emergency physician on the front lines, we are definitely seeing more and more patients who are very sick with COVID-19 in our emergency department. Just as an example, last week, I had to admit nearly every COVID-19 patient that I saw in the ED. A lot of them I had to admit to the ICU, and they were patients across the spectrum. So I admitted patients in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Just in that one shift, I worked very hard to try to prevent from having to intubate several of my patients. And I saw by the next day, 2 of my patients, both a male in his 30s as well as a female in her 80s, had been intubated. So we're definitely seeing a climb in the number of cases, but also it is having a definite impact on what we're seeing in our healthcare system. And so thank you very much for everything you do to mitigate the risks of this disease and prevent the transmission of this disease. And thank you again for giving me the time to present this to you. And one of my public health liaisons is available now to answer any questions. And I have to get to a shift, so I hope you have a fantastic evening.
Ms. Taylor, thank you for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Questions from council? One thing I will address is that there was a teleconference today. There will be one tomorrow. The medical university and the other hospitals are working on ways to roll out the vaccination in our town. We appreciate that very much, and look forward to a large percentage of our population taking advantage of that. And I want to thank you for all that you have done.
Us too.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question,
Yes,
if
sir.
that's okay.
And then
I noticed they keep saying Charleston County, and we know that Charleston County is 100 miles long. Is there any way they can, kind of sharpen it to where we can see in Charleston County what areas are the most highest with the COVID and which ones aren't? So, I personally would like to see that so that we can see where Mount Pleasant falls in there, because just by saying county, 100-mile-long county is pretty long, so I'd like to be able to see where in the county I think most of the cases are.
Sure, yeah, well, I'll have to look into that, and I can touch base with Christine or the mayor and just forward that information on to you. I don't know off the top of my head. I know that there are websites that allow you to search by the zip code. I don't know about city specific. We might have to collect several different zip codes and look at what that percentage looks like.
Thank you.
Mr. Chapman.
Yes, and thank you very much for the presentation. I believe the governor, as of yesterday, changed the age down to 70 from 75.
Yes, sir. That's
so
correct.
I just wanted to make sure that is the proper age right now, while the presentation said 75.
Yes.
Is that just because MUSC hasn't gotten down to the 70 yet, or is it because MUSC is still sticking with the 75?
That's because Dr. Menken-Smith recorded this Monday. What's today? Today's Tuesday. She recorded it Monday morning before a 12-hour shift that went from 12 p.m. to 12 a.m. in preparation for today. So that at that time was correct, and they have made that change, and MUSC is open to vaccinate individuals from 70 up, and I would anticipate that in the next couple of days we'll continue seeing changes in openings, so keep your eyes and ears open.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Lanning?
Thank you so much for taking the time to present and also for the doctor's presentation. And Councilman Chapman, you asked one of my questions because I'd heard about the 70. I think we all got an email too. So good to hear that and very excited for people to be able to take advantage. I did want to say in regard, I do watch the numbers very closely, and it's on the DHEC site, and it used to be a lot easier to find, I have to say, but Amanda Knight with the town helped me a lot on this, and it is, you do, I have to say, if you have something that you can touch with your finger, that's not going to be specific enough. You have to be able to have a mouse to click right on it, but you go to the cases, and then you go to the zip codes, and basically if you can do 6-4 and 6-6, you pretty much pick up Mount Pleasant. Our numbers are fortunately lower here, from what I can tell, than Charleston County as a whole. We have to remember Charleston County includes North Charleston and downtown and so forth. And also statewide, our numbers seem to be, and it could be because our lifestyle is a lot more outside here. That could be part of it, and the humidity. But anyway, it's a good thing to keep an eye on. I appreciate your time again.
Yeah, and thank you for contributing that. I think that's important to understand. I think along with that is realizing that Mount Pleasant has so much to offer by way of activities, outdoor activities specifically. You guys have beautiful parks, great waterfront, good dining, good restaurants, great shopping. I come here from downtown to go to Aldi and Trader Joe's and Whole Foods because that's where I like to shop. So realizing that while your numbers might be really good, you are having people come from downtown, from North Charleston, from James Island and Johns Island to enjoy everything that you have to offer. And so while you guys might look really good, you do have to be very conscious of everyone else that thinks Mount Pleasant is the place to be.
Thank you. We think it's the place to be.
Yeah, we do.
It's pretty nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? Ms. Taylor, thank you. And thank you to Dr. Menken-Smith. We appreciate this. And as things change and situations change and vaccines start rolling out, we may call on y'all again. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. If anybody has questions about vaccines, I'm happy to answer those too. I don't know everything there is to know, but if you want to come up to me after, I'm happy to do that. I would say if I can be a teacher for a second, because I was a teacher before I was a nurse. The 4 main areas of attention to pay to any area that you're in: wear that mask, keep the distance. If you can, open a window, do something outside, and wash your hands. And that's what I've got. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. This moves us to item 5, approval of the minutes from the December 8th, 2020 Town Council meeting and the November 2020 financial statement. Do we have a motion?
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Mr. Chapman had a point that he would like to make, please.
Mr. Mayor, I noticed in the financial statement that there is a difference in the remaining balance of about $12 million of expenditures versus revenues. And I would like to ask Mr. DeMora to help us understand what that difference is and any significance of that.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir, a very good question. I'm happy to answer it. What you see reflected in the current financial statement is very similar to what our performance is this time every year. Please remember that our number one revenue, our largest revenue source in the town, is property taxes. And we start to receive that now. Most of that money comes in throughout the month of January. And so this is normal. This looks as it should. What I can tell you also is this underscores the importance of reserves. You know, we don't have to issue tax anticipation notes or revenue anticipation notes because we have adequate reserves to always carry us until the major revenue sources come in.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
I just, Mayor, thought it was important in case any member of the public looked at this and wanted to know, you know, is this something that we need to be concerned about? And as Mr. Demora mentioned, this is something that happens every year for the town. And because of our very good staff in maintaining the balance of available funds to be able to be used, we don't have to issue tax anticipation notes like probably 95% of the communities all over South Carolina have to do. So we're very fortunate, and the staff is to be commended for that.
Thank you very much. So we have a motion to approve. We have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the minutes and the financials are approved. Item number 6 is public comment. When your name is called, please come to the lectern. You'll have 2 minutes, please. Name and address. Thank you.
First is Kevin Kuning.
Kevin Cunane, 3032 River Vista Way. Back again. Going to be discussing the state law regarding beach access. Obviously, the town should be supporting that. In the past, the council did resolutions sent up to the state, and there was some, you know, banter about how we're not supposed to do it. I don't believe, I know, that came from the mayor. Guess he didn't like who was proposing it, maybe. So we'll see what he says tonight. But the reason Mount Pleasant people got restricted from the beaches was because of the domino effect that the mayor participated in right here in town. We closed parks. The excellent nurse that just spoke, the doctor, never once have I heard anybody say, stay away from the parks because you're going to get corona. It's ridiculous because everybody has now learned, and everybody knew this a year ago too. Vitamin D, activity, good for your lungs. And we're restricting people from the parks just because we can. That's tyranny. I mean, that's a domino effect that goes from here through Nancy Pelosi right up to Andrew Cuomo and out to Gavin Newsom. You got to say no to the tyranny. There's no reason to restrict people when there's no science behind it. In fact, the science is exactly opposite. So what happened here may not have been a big deal. We went 6 months with no meetings, right? No public input, no Kevin Cunane up here complaining, right? But the beaches saw that and said, oh, now's our chance. We can restrict parking and claim it's related to COVID-19. It's horrible. So remember what you do, people watch and they parrot it. Matter of fact, I think it started in Charleston and it was copycatted by the mayor. So really, ridiculous. Don't do it, resist it, fight on our behalf to make sure that nonsense like that does not go on. Thank you.
Myra Jones.
My name is Myra Jones, and I've been a Mount Pleasant resident for 30 years. I'm here on behalf of my family and the Charleston Beach Foundation. Last summer, I wanted to take my grandchild to the beach. Unfortunately, due to the actions of the councils of Isle of Palms, Sullivan's Island, and Folly Beach, that was difficult, if not impossible to do. I do not need to remind you of the beach town's actions in restricting access and parking, and the effect this had on the general public last summer. These beach towns have further plans to charge for and restrict parking and access. They've forgotten that the beach belongs to all of us. In order to ensure that these restrictions do not happen again, Senator Grooms has pre-filed Bill S-40. Our foundation is actively supporting this bill, and we encourage you to do the same by adopting this resolution. We have provided you with a copy of the presentation, which is being sent to local and state elected officials, asking that they take action and also support this bill. It includes compelling personal writings, stories, and photos, many of which are from Mount Pleasant residents. Please take some time to review these. By adopting this resolution and supporting this bill, you are making a statement to our legislators that this is a necessity. As John Lewis said, when you see something that is not right, not just, not fair, you have a moral obligation to say something, to do something. Please do something. Pass this resolution. Thank you. I have extra copies of the presentation if you care to have one. Thank you.
Jimmy Bagwell?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jimmy Bagwell. I live at 41 Vincent Drive here in Mount Pleasant. I've lived here for 72 years, and most of those 72 years I've been involved in Shem Creek one way or another, whether it was playing on Shem Creek Gary or working on Shem Creek, and now I'm very lucky to live on Shem Creek. Tonight y'all have a chance to pass a resolution that I hope you will do that will ensure the continued use of Shem Creek not only by recreational boaters, but by our hardworking commercial fishermen and just people who love to come to Shem Creek to see the natural beauty. The town has invested millions and millions of dollars in Shem Creek, and what you've done is fantastic. I don't know anybody that doesn't like to go down there and walk those boardwalks, visit those restaurants, and just take in the natural beauty we have. The Corps of Engineers plan is definitely going to be a detriment to Shem Creek over the next few years. We need to fight as hard as we possibly can to make sure that that plan is not used. I agree with the ATM study. I think that the plan needs to be moved further south. I was 10 years old when Shem Creek was created, when Crab Bank was created. I remember boating out there, swimming out there, playing out there, fishing out there. Crab Bank was always a wonderful part of our waterfront. As you can see what's happened, it has migrated north for the last 60 years and is now threatening to form a land bridge from Crab Bank over to Patriots Point. If that happens, the rookery is not going to survive. I believe that the rookery should be there. I support the rookery. One of the great benefits of living on Shem Creek is to be able to watch the birds, the wildlife that we have. I enjoy watching the kayakers and all the boaters that like to come and visit Shem Creek and be a part of it. So let's preserve Shem Creek. It's one of our most valuable assets. When people come over that bridge to Mount Pleasant, one of the first things they want to do is go to Shem Creek and take in the beauty and eat some seafood. So please vote tonight for that resolution, and let's work hard as we can to keep the Corps of Engineers from spoiling Shem Creek. Thank you very much.
Cynthia Tarvin?
Cynthia Tarvin, 337 Seawee Circle. I'm one of the owners of Tarvin Seafood and 2 shrimp trawlers, the Carolina Breeze and the Miss Paula. I'm speaking for myself and also for several other shrimpers and fishermen who have joined me here this evening, and you can see them in one of the rows back there. I'm here to encourage the council to seriously consider the negative economic impact of the current renourishment plan for Crab Bank. Our businesses and boats all work out of Shem Creek. In recent years, shrimping out of Shem Creek has become more financially viable, as evidenced by these younger shrimpers and fishermen here tonight. Some are even at the beginning of their careers as captains. However, all local commercial fishing depends on being able to get in and out of the creek. Hog Channel at the mouth of the creek and the Shem Creek Channel are already very difficult for many boats to navigate, especially at low tide. The larger boats draw enough water that they already need to leave an hour or two either side of low tide to safely navigate. Also, I can't tell you how many times we watch the private boats run aground at the mouth of the creek in the Hog Channel area. So this is not a problem limited to big commercial vessels. You should also know that the local seafood community is not limited to us fishing families or the people who work for us. Local residents and businesses who want fresh seafood come to the dock to buy our catches, as do peddlers who carry shrimp to nearby communities. Additionally, many of the restaurants in the greater Charleston area feature our local products on their menus, and we proudly contribute to the great reputation that so many of them enjoy. Shrimp and fish from the docks on Shem Creek are well known throughout our region, and we hope to keep it that way. The silting in of areas at the mouth of Shem Creek is already a problem and will become a greater problem with the core plan. I encourage you to instead allow the town to continue to negotiate to adopt a plan which reduces sediment impacts to Hog Channel and Shem Creek, thereby allowing these fishermen to continue to work safely to provide you terrific seafood products. Please don't let this vibrant industry fade away. Thank you.
That's all I have, sir.
Is there anyone else for public comment who did not sign up? Last call. All right, thank you very much. That closes item 6 on the agenda. Item number 7, consent agenda items. There are no consent agenda items. Item number 8 is planning new business.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Council.
And congratulations.
Well, thank you. This first hearing before you is an ordinance providing for the annexation of an approximately 1 acre tract of land. It is located at 1619 Highway 41.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Approved.
First reading, ordinance number 21001.
Okay, moving on. This next one is an ordinance to amend the North Point Plan Development District Ordinance by creating permitted uses and development standards. The North Point development is located on the northeast side of Ben Sawyer Boulevard at its intersection with Center Street. You can see it there outlined in red. It was adopted in 1980. However, when it was adopted and zoned PD ordinance, there was never a corresponding text or map that was associated with it. So it just had this zoning sitting there. It's become an issue over the years. Originally, the developer would approve design and placement of buildings and things like that. And they had covenants and restrictions, but they were never codified in an ordinance. And so it has been an issue over the years where folks have wanted to make additions to their house, do accessory structures, things like this. They would call the town, and the town couldn't tell them what their setbacks were. We have had a few rezonings. This is the future land use map. It does call for traditional neighborhood. This is the current zoning map. So you can see we've had a few zonings over the years where we did recommend folks rezone it if they wanted to make a change to their property. And typically it was R4 because it made sense. It was recommended at the time for medium density, and it was commensurate with the lot standards in that development. And then we've also had a rezoning to office professional over the years. So earlier last year, we had a gentleman come in and want to rezone his property. It was a little bit larger, and it was denied, and council sort of directed staff to look at this as a more holistic approach. And so we did an exercise where we went through and we looked at all the lot sizes, and it got very tedious in that we could have everything from R1 to R2 to R4. And then we had the townhouses, we had some office professional in there, and then on the corner, there's the SCE&G, now Dominion Energy property. And so we started looking at, really this is the definition of a planned development. You know, typically we guide folks to, if you can go with a straight zoning district, you should, but this really met the requirements of a planned development. So what we did as staff was just write a very basic PD ordinance and establish standards for all the lots. And so what we did was come up with a single-family detached. So if it was a single-family detached structure, you were subject to the town's R4 standards. Townhouses, you're subject to the town's townhouse district. Office professional, you're subject to office professional, and then that corner lot of Dominion was to be designated as PI1. So that's really what we have presented here tonight. So as I said, it would remain as a planned development, but it would be subject to those different town districts. So if there was any change in the town's ordinance, it would refer back to that. And then there was also a concern when the last parcel came through that it was a little bit larger lot and it could be further subdivided. So we just put a sentence in there that basically said no lot could be further subdivided unless they came before this body for a PD amendment.
Mayor, I move for approval, and then I want to make a comment.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Chapman, you have the floor.
I was very concerned about that one piece of property when it came to us. And I was also on the Planning Commission when several of the lots in there did get approval for rezoning, and it was reasonable. But the staff has done a great job coming up with a plethora of different ways to skin this cat, because it was an issue that anytime somebody came to them trying to improve their property, they didn't have any rules to look at. So, I made the motion, we approve this, and I want to thank the staff for working this through, because it was not easy to do with all the different types of structures, different sizes of lots, different types of property. And they did a great job.
Thank you. Any discussion? Yes, ma'am.
I would like to echo Mr. Chapman's sentiments. Thank you very much for doing this. This was something that was very concerning to me, to have a PD out there without an accompanying zoning ordinance that provided the appropriate guidelines so that property owners knew what their boundaries were, and so that we actually had boundaries for what those properties could become. So, and I think that the method of having it tie into our existing ordinances is a great idea. So thank you so much.
All right. Time to vote. All in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
It's first reading, ordinance number 21002.
Next.
And this last one is a text amendment. You can see here, we have our principal use table, which lays out your uses and then all of our zoning districts. So if you'll see under government facilities, we have a section that says you can have a lay-down yard, a maintenance facility with open lot storage of materials, vehicles, and equipment. Currently, this is what's approved. This is a permitted use in public institutional 2 and light industrial. And it's come up before, but it came up more recently with a property on Chuck Dolly, where we realized that this applies to government facilities, but it doesn't apply to quasi-governmental or private utilities. And so we felt like, to be consistent, we wanted to bring that same permitted use down under utilities to make it consistent with government facilities. And again, we would make it permitted in public institutional 2 and light industrial for consistency. So this is really kind of a cleanup. We wanted some consistency between those two types of utilities and uses, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve in a second. Any discussion? All right. All in favor of the motion to approve, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
First reading, ordinance number 21003.
Next.
Yes, Mayor, this is your opportunity now to look at the resolution, which deals with the designation of additional historic properties in the Old Village Historic District. And I'll just give you a quick summary, if I could. Just in terms of background, this district has existed since 1979. It is a local zoning district. It is not a Federal Register historic district, but we do have one of those, which was previously established in 1973. And local historic zoning districts, as opposed to National Register districts, come with regulations and guidelines and requirements. And your Historic District Preservation Commission is responsible for administering those. Here is sort of at the upper left of the screen, the National Register District, and then our local historic district, which is slightly larger and moves down towards the Pitt Street Bridge. So our district in red covers this entire area, and these are the existing locally designated structures and properties as of today. Same map again, and just shows you the those which are not considered contributing historic structures, and the blue ones are.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to make a motion to adopt this resolution, but then accept that I would like to make another motion to amend the adoption of the resolution. Having gone, since our meeting on Monday for committees, we've received some objections to certain of the properties, and reasoning has been provided with them. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the 35 properties that would be given this designation. There are 5 that have objected, and given their reasoning for their objections, I'm comfortable with removing them from that and allowing them to opt out of the designation and leave the remaining properties in. So I would like to make a motion to adopt the resolution, and then as soon as someone seconds, I would like to make a motion to amend.
Right. So we have a motion and a second, so we are in discussion. I guess first I will ask legal to make sure that we are able to do that at this time.
Yes, sir, Mayor, that's
Okay.
appropriate.
We're able to do this at this time. I guess one question would be, are we sure that those are all the ones who don't want the designation?
So from my understanding, the property owners were all notified, they were all given letters, they were all given an opportunity to respond. Mr. Alma, was there anything, can you talk about a little bit about how they were notified?
The commission, as they held their meetings, we did mailed notices to the property owners. Properties were also posted physically with our bright yellow signs for the Historic District Preservation Commission. Letters for the public hearing and this meeting this evening were sent out by certified mail, and we received, I think everybody signed those green certifications, and we received those
Okay.
back. So
we can be reasonably
we've done an
sure that those-
extensive amount of notice, making sure that folks were aware of this effort.
Okay. So yes, we have the main motion. We're in discussion on the main motion before we get to the motion to amend it. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Corley.
I just have a question. So why did I was surprised by the amount of residents that weren't aware that they could opt out. Did the letter state that they could opt out, or it just said?
I don't remember what the notice letter was in terms of opting out or not. That's an option. So the staff and the commission reviewed 138 properties, narrowed it down to these 35, and made these recommendations to you. And then folks had the ability, one way or the other, to either support. I don't know that we've had any, we've had the 4 or 5 that have voiced opposition. I don't believe we've had anything on the other side with support for the remaining ones. So you would be going off, not hearing something from folks, rather than hearing their interest in being designated.
One more question. If they sell their house, would the new owner then have an option to opt out, or once you've declared this?
It's designated and it runs with, with the property.
And it's
You would have to go back through another process to undesignate it, if you will. I don't know that we've ever done that, but you could.
Okay. Yes, sir, Mr. Rambo.
I would personally feel more comfortable sending this back to committee and having committee go ahead and remove the 5 properties of people that have objected. And then since this doesn't require 2 readings, since it's only a 1 reading and done thing, that will also just give another month for people to be aware of what's going on, and just give 1 more month for people who don't want to participate in this to let us know why and let us know their reasoning. So that's what my comfort level would be.
Let me just check, make sure legal, if that would be possible, and by what means would we do that? Amend the motion to send it back to the committee?
First of all, yes, sir, it is possible. I think a few things can happen. Either the council can vote on the motion as is, or it can be withdrawn and the second withdrawn and a new motion to replace it.
Would you like to do that?
I think Ms. Landing wanted to speak.
Yes, ma'am, sure, okay.
Thank you. I'm really echoing but adding a little bit to Councilman Rambo, and that is that one of the letters we received, just so the public knows, because you don't see these necessarily, is only written January 8th and referred to the fact that they own property in this area that would be designated, and they said, while we did not receive proper notice of the hearing scheduled tonight, we have now become aware that it was scheduled. Now, whether they did or not, what we've discovered is it doesn't matter if you have yellow signs and emails and all kinds of things posted. A lot of times people miss it. So I'm in complete agreement. We should give this a little more time, because there may be people, other people, that are now going to realize, oh, this is going to have more impact on me than I thought.
All right, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'm comfortable with withdrawing my motion, but I also think that having it be an automatic opt-out is something that I'm not 100% comfortable with, because the whole purpose of designating things as historic is to preserve and protect the character of the community. So I think that if in the interim we do receive additional requests to be opted out, I mean, it's one thing, to get a request that say, it's almost entirely gone, the original structure's entirely gone, or what remains of this structure is bricks you can buy at Lowe's for $1.50. I think that is a justification to be removed. But I think that if something that is truly historic, I mean, there's one of the houses here from 1847. I think that we as council have the discretion to say no and to keep them within that historic designation. So I'm comfortable withdrawing my motion and sending it back to committee.
All right, withdraw the second? Yes. All right,
I'd like to make a motion to send it back to committee.
Well,
Second.
I want to speak on this. And I think Ms.
We got a
Hyde
motion.
wants to
yes,
speak
hang
as
on a
well.
second. We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Yes, sir, you have it. And the motion is to send it back to the committee, Ms. Chapman.
Well, I spent a good bit of time over the weekend looking at every one of these properties. I also saw, in some cases, and I don't know what was there before, properties in the middle of this being torn down, the land being leveled. This is a very special part of the town of Mount Pleasant. So Ms. Whitley mentioned that we've got to protect these properties. And in some cases, we've missed the chance. We've missed the chance to do that. So I'm in favor of sending it back, but having specifics about why these properties were included. I know, and there was one letter we got from a member of the commission saying that they made a mistake in their vote. And I understand that, and that's a good reason to send it back to the committee, because it means that maybe some people missed something. But this area of town is special, and we need to be on guard to protect it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, and then back to,
Just one thing that I would say is if we can budget in committee time for next month, enough time to go through these properties, because I think that's something that's important to do, to go through them. And there's a lot to go through, so we need to budget the time.
Mr. Santos.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, being born and raised here, that's always been a special place for us. I've always thought a man's home was his castle and his family's castle. And I just have a hard time having the government say, we're going to do this, we're going to put your house in a historic district. It's their house, and I think they need to be able to make that decision whether or not they want to come in or not. But to force people to come in because we want to do something with the district, to me, I just have an issue with that. And I don't like the fact that we're coming and telling these people, this is what we're going to do to your home. And so if people want to raise their hand and say, hey, I want to do this, great. But I think if people don't want to do it, and if you may have people who are a homeowner that lives somewhere else in another state that are leasing it out and they don't even know what's going on. I just want to know where we draw the line with government overreach and not. I think it's worked well. If you look at it right now, I think it's beautiful down there. Everybody loves going down there and seeing it. And so I'm not quite sure that us stepping in and putting this on them is the proper thing for us to do. I'm glad you're bringing it back to committee because we can look at it again. But I just think that we need to pause and think about government's role in this and telling people what to do with their property. That's all.
Any other comments? All right, the motion is to send this back to the committee, planning committee, at the February meeting. Anyone else want to?
Ms. Hyde?
Yes, Ms. Hyde?
I was just going to say that over the weekend, I looked at every one of these, and they all looked like significant properties. There's several that I could not believe had not already been designated historic. These are houses in the old village, right? The houses right next door to Pitt Street Pharmacy and that little business district. I mean, it's just unbelievable to me that they aren't already historic. But honestly, I didn't see any that I felt didn't belong on this list. So everybody might want to drive around and look. And the area is worth preserving. It just goes along with living here in Charleston and in this area. We want to preserve what we have, and there's a reason people want to come here. And if we just let everybody tear down anything they want to, then you lose a lot of the reason people want to be here. So to me, they're all important, and it's worth a second look if everybody wants to do that.
Thank you. All right, we'll call the question. The motion is to send this back to the committee to go over the reasons and look at those who want to opt out. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passes unanimous.
Between government overreach, but they still can change. It's just more.
Item number 5.
And it's only external. It's not internal. So we'll have good discussion. It will be good. Yeah.
Item number 5 is the annual report regarding development agreements.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is a requirement of state law and our zoning code, where the zoning administrator provides to the council a report on our outstanding development agreements and the status of activity as required. So you see Carolina Park in this particular one, and Liberty Hill Farms, and then the only other one is Patriots Annex, which has a different kind of development agreement, which just relates to the payment in lieu of taxes component. But those 2 other developments are making progress. The last thing with Carolina Park, for instance, is Faison Road and the widening between Park Avenue Boulevard out to 17. Those approvals are in place, and they're moving to do that particular road improvement construction. Liberty Hill Farms is further behind, but they are still continuing to make the required improvements as stipulated in that development agreement. So it's just a report to you, and no action is required on council's part.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Item number 6, approval of a request for vested rights extension.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve in a second. Is there any discussion?
Just that this is a requirement. We must approve this 1-year extension. This is the 3rd of the 4 1-year.
This is the 3rd of 5 potential 1-year extensions. So they start with 2 and then eligible for 5 1-year extensions.
That
So
we're
it's the
required to
3rd.
approve, so.
No ordinances have changed that would affect this property.
You just said no ordinance have changed?
Have changed,
Okay, so it
so they're
is in
still
compliance
vested
with
and it's-
everything? Okay. All right. We had a motion and a second. Yes, sir.
I said this, I think, last year, but I don't understand why we vote on something that we're required to approve. I'll just say it again. You don't even have to answer it.
I would answer it, sir, by saying
Silly.
that is challenging for lawyers to understand as well.
Okay, yeah, all right.
All right. All in favor of the motion to approve, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? You can oppose it.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I rise to a point of privilege. This is Mr. Olma's last night with us, and I want to commend him for the great job he's done as our Director of Planning. I mean, he's gone overboard, and I want to thank him.
There, you can see my smile.
And wish him the best in his retirement.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure working with you all and the staff and in the community. I've been doing this a long time, and I thought my 5-year plan would work, but it shortened down to 3. But I will be around, and I will be watching. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd also like to congratulate Michelle for such a great job for her first time up there. She did a fantastic job. Congratulations.
We look forward to working with you from here on.
Yeah.
Very much.
Thank you all.
Jeff, don't go far.
Thank you.
This moves us to Section 8B, Old Business. There is no planning old business. Item 9, committee action items. There are no committee action items. Section 10, council new business. Item number 1, adoption of a resolution in support of an alternate plan to renourish Crab Bank. The chair will entertain a motion to
So moved.
approve.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Discussion?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chapman.
Mayor, this is important enough to go see our legislators, and I mean congressional legislators, because they're the ones who sign off on the budget for the Corps of Engineers. And I'm not sure how we're going to do that with everything going on right now in Washington, but I think it's critical that we make an effort to meet with Senator Scott and Senator Graham particularly, and with our new representative, Representative Mace, to try to make sure that they understand the significance of what the Corps is doing on the community. And the two reports that we have paid for to have done, to maybe have a presentation made to them, either individually or collectively, to make sure they understand how significant what the Corps is doing and how expensive it is going to be for the town if they keep doing what they're doing. So I'd just like to offer that, and I'm not sure how we're going to do that, but we need to make every effort to do it.
We are. Mr. Santos.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we ought to invite the Corps to come here and address council, talk to us about their intentions and why they want to do what they want to do, and gives all council members an opportunity to ask them questions and, you know, try and talk about it. I've had situations where I've had to go meet with them, and I was very nervous. I didn't think they'd talk to me, and I was welcomed in, and they were great meetings, and we were able to do some things. As you remember, Riley Reach, they were very open to doing that, and that's changing something in a federal channel. And I didn't think I would get anywhere with that, and here we are. So I would say I'd like to invite them here, you know, to come to council and address council and tell us why they want to do what they want to do, and let us have a discussion with them. I don't think we've done that before. To me, I think it'd be a first, but at least we're reaching out before we go run to our elected officials in Columbia. I think we ought to give them a chance to come and talk to us, and let's see what they have to say before we go to Columbia. We certainly don't want to upset them and make it feel like we're going around them to get up to have things done. I'd like to have them come stand at this podium and give us the facts and tell us why they want to do what they want to do.
Okay, want to add, they did come here once earlier. Since then, it got delayed, and the latest word from them is they are completing their data gathering this month, January, new LiDAR data and that stuff, and they will be collecting that and announcing their preferred alternative in February. So our February meeting may be a good time to have them here. And we can certainly take a look at doing that. Yes, sir, Mr. O'Rourke.
I think we shouldn't move fast past what Councilmember Chapman said. And Gary, we can invite them here and they can talk to us, but they take their orders from their elected people. And the second thing is, and I think we should, we have the money to do this, but I think we should have the mayor and a couple of council members go up to their office and actually sit in front of them with something that we can leave behind so that they know that this is important, and it is important. And if we convince them, those phone calls will come from the top down. And that's where I think we will have our best choice to have action. We all, I think, agree that this is pretty important. And I don't think it's beyond the need to protect this to actually appropriate some money to get up there. And you can fly up in the morning and come back at night. It's not a difficult trip to DC anymore. And if we can set that appointment up, I think it would not be a bad idea if a couple of elected people went up there to meet with both of those people. We all know them well enough that I believe they'll make that a priority.
Well, and I'm sorry for interrupting anybody, but I think at that meeting that the senators or the representative will invite the Corps representatives. The Corps would be at that meeting. They wouldn't be just meeting us. They would want the Corps there while we're there making that presentation. So it's not like we're leaving them out, but we're helping them being the Corps, by having support from the elected officials who, like I said, vote on their budget, to make sure that's in the budget, to do whatever they got to do to help us.
Right. And I will interject that we know Senator Graham's staff, their offices in Mount Pleasant, is, I would say, very on top of this situation. They have all of our information. They have been in contact a good bit. I think Mr. DeMora can attest to that. And so we won't be catching them cold on any of this, which is good. I would want to ask, first of all, that we put this also on the Police, Judicial, and Legal Committee agenda for next month, and ask our attorney that if everything goes poorly, and I'm not saying it will, but if we don't get an answer that we think we can live with, what possible legal options we may have, if we have any at all. We certainly don't want anything bad to happen to the post-45 harbor deepening. But I think it needs to be said that we are the only municipality that is going to have the equivalent of 40 to 50 acres of a man-made island dumped at the entrance to our most important local navigable stream, navigable creek. And you don't see that anywhere else. You don't see the advocacy groups out there advocating for man-made islands that are unnatural in other places except here. So there's a little twist to that. And I think Mr. DeMora did a great job laying out the potential downside of that in his talk earlier as he set it up. So somebody remind me, did we have the motion yet to, yes, we did. We had the motion and the second. Any further discussion, or do we need to amend this in any way?
But, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to
Yes,
say
sir.
between now and then, if it's okay with council, I'd like to try and get a meeting set up with the local Corps of Engineers to talk to them before going to Washington, just to get their take on it, where we stand right now, so that they know that we're pushing this hard and know that we're planning on going to Washington. And so I'd really like to give one more shot. I mean, you can go ahead and plan your trip for next month, but I'd like to reach out to them and let's see if we can't talk to them again. And who knows? The answer is always no till you ask. And maybe they can look at it a different way, and we won't have to go to Washington to get this done.
All right. Any other? All in favor of the motion to approve the resolution supporting an alternate plan to renourish Crab Bank, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Resolution 21014.
Item number 2 is a resolution in support of Senate Bill S-40, introduced by one of our own members of the state Senate. And
Motion to approve?
Second.
we have a motion to approve in a second. Mr. Rambo, do you have?
Yes.
Yes.
So a couple comments. First of all, I think Ms. Myra from the Beach Foundation said it best, that it is sad that this legislation is even necessary. East Cooper used to be all one community. We were all friends, all went to the same schools. We relied on each other. We still do rely on each other for mutual aid and automatic aid agreements, for police and fire. But unfortunately, there's been a small group of island elites that have tried to shut off our folks' access to the beach. And it's not right. There was a time over the spring where the beaches were completely closed due to COVID concerns. And then once they opened, they restricted the parking due to COVID concerns. And at that time said, oh, this is all about safety. This isn't a permanent plan or whatever. Well, what did they do 2 months later? Made it a permanent plan. And so what really needs to happen, instead of municipalities fighting each other and that sort of thing, is for the state to step in and make it clear once and for all that the beach belongs to everyone and the parking along state roads should be accessible and should be free to the public. So that's it. And then I would also like to make a motion to amend the resolution. On the 6th whereas, It says the town of Sullivan's Island and the city of Isle of Palms have continued to restrict access. This bill deals with all barrier island municipalities. So while Sullivan's Island and Isle of Palms are closest to us, our citizens, many of which go to Folly Beach or wherever. So I would like to take out where it says the town of Sullivan's Island and the city of Isle of Palms and replace that with barrier island municipalities.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion on the amendment?
Yes, sir. There is another amendment that probably needs to be made because the bill does not propose that parking on all state highway facilities located on barrier islands be free. It specifically says, and I'll read it to you, parking on state highway facilities located on barrier islands shall be free and may only be restricted by the Department of Transportation. And they would determine what the restrictions are and whether or not it would be free. So if you're citing the bill, you need to correct that too.
Okay, if you'd like to make that after we vote on this motion, this amendment. So we're voting on the amendment to change the language from those specific neighbors of ours to all coastal barrier islands. All in favor of the motion to amend on that portion, I believe is paragraph 6, the sixth paragraph
sixth
down?
paragraph.
Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have that amendment. Mr. Chapman, do you have another?
Yes, sir. I'd like to amend, let me get the resolution, to revise the fifth whereas to reflect the wording in the bill as opposed to the way it's currently worded, because it does not say what it says. And that is in it's section 3, article 5, and section 57.5, 845 is where it should reflect.
And you're referring to Bill S-40?
I'm referring to Bill S-40.
Yes, sir. Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
What's the actual language that's being changed? That's what.
If the chair may, what I'd like to say is, in broad, rather than having to recite it all, is that it reflect exactly what the bill says.
Correct.
About parking and any limitations on it.
Correct.
Okay?
Okay, yeah.
Does that pass legal muster?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Clear enough to everybody?
Yeah.
All right, we had a motion, we had a second. Any discussion?
I'm sorry, who was the second?
I saw, okay, Mr. Santos.
Thank you.
I saw a head nod down here, but we'll go with Mr. Santos, that's good. All right, any further discussion on that amendment? All right, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we have 2 amendments. Now we go back to the main motion, which is to approve the resolution as amended. We are still in discussion. Yes, sir, Mr. Chapman.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, I don't believe that as a government, we should be telling other governments what to do. We have enough to say grace over in Mount Pleasant. And while we have certainly gotten a lot of letters, phone calls, comments from our constituents about what Sullivan's Island has done, what Isle of Palms has done, we still have to work with them. And there are other ways which this law or this bill that's been introduced to get the message across. But for the town of Mount Pleasant, which may need help from Sullivan's Island or Isle of Palms on some issues in the future, for us to tell them how to operate their governments, I think is wrong. And I'll probably be the only one that will vote against this resolution. But I feel strongly that, as an example, there's been some talk about charging for parking at our park again. And I'd probably vote to do that, because we need to look at turning that over. And there may be some people who come over here to use our pier for fishing and want to park for free. My only point is, there are other ways to solve this problem. And I specifically talked to Senator Grooms and told him why I was going to be voting against this resolution. And he's a good friend, and I've worked with him on a number of issues, but as the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee, DOT works for them in terms of their budget. He sets their budget. So what he's doing is looking out for DOT, and DOT has the responsibility on the roads, and I think probably all of them, on the Isle of Palms and Sullivan's Island. So they've made some changes, they being the town of, the city of Isle of Palms, and they made them because DOT made them do it. So my only point is, I don't think Mount Pleasant telling the city of Isle of Palms and the city of Sullivan's Island how to run their governments is the right thing to do.
Ms. Landing, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the distinguishing factor here, because I agree that municipalities should have their own home rule, no question. But I think what we have as a distinguishing factor here is we're talking about state highway facilities. So when you're talking about a state highway and yet a local municipality was imposing restrictions that caused everyone in the whole area, including their neighbors, to now not have nearly as easy access and to have to pay, versus if a town of Mount Pleasant road, such as Harry Hallman Boulevard in front of the waterfront park, if for some reason, I'm not saying we are, but just to use that example, if we were going to somehow do something, that's a town of Mount Pleasant road. So I think that's the big difference here. This is a state highway. We want to adopt, or we are voting, excuse me, to adopt a resolution or not in regard to supporting a state bill, a Senate bill, on a state highway facility, and that's why I think it's appropriate.
Mr. Santos.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just to address Mr. Chapman's remarks about government telling other government what to do and what not to do. As we all know, we have automatic aid for our firefighters to go over to Sullivan's Island and to help them with serious life-threatening situations. And they welcome us coming over there to do that. Yet they turn around and tell our first responders that they can't sit on the beach with their child and draw in a chair and make sandcastles in the stand. So we certainly have a government that's telling us what we can do, and so I'm certainly happy to be to return the favor, so to speak, until we can get this straightened out.
Anyone else? All right, the motion is to approve the resolution in support of Senate Bill S-40 as amended. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion passes 8-1.
Resolution 21015.
Number 3, Mrs. Kotoff, is a resolution for the town authorizing a lease purchase agreement.
Yes, sir. This is a resolution to enter into a lease purchase with TD Equipment Finance Incorporated for the town's fiscal year 2020.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We always cut you off, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We have a motion to approve and a second. We're in discussion. Ms. Kotoff, is your heart set on finishing your explanation? Or
Sir.
Are you sure? Okay. Is this clear enough for everybody for the record what we're doing? Okay, just want to make sure. All right, all in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Kotoff.
Yes, sir.
Resolution 21012.
Number 4 is another resolution, has to do with reimbursing something about the United States Treasury Department, the Internal Revenue Service, and it sure got my attention. So, Ms. Kotoff.
Yes, sir. This is a resolution declaring the town's intent to reimburse itself with proceeds from certain obligations. This resolution ensures that eligible money spent in advance of our general obligation borrowing can be reimbursed from proceeds from that borrowing.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion to approve, and we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Resolution 21013.
Thank you very much. That moves us to item number 5, which is not an adoption, but a first reading of an ordinance to provide for the issuance and sale not exceeding $10,050,000.
Yes, sir. This is an ordinance for a general obligation bond issued in an amount not to exceed $10,050,000 for 10 years. The bond will be issued to fund and defray the cost of acquiring, improving, constructing, reconstructing, and equipping of stormwater systems and drainage improvements, facilities and infrastructure and other improvements, infrastructure and property in support thereof. Also to defray issuance costs.
Second.
You almost made it all the way through. We have a motion to approve and a second.
And this is a significant
Yes,
thing for the
I was
town
going
of
to say,
Mount Pleasant.
we should have had some cake and some champagne. This is wonderful,
should
and
have.
thank you to the Finance Committee and the Flood Resilience Committee and the Public Services Committee, everybody that has worked on getting drainage fixed. This is wonderful. Ms. Lanning.
A couple quick comments, as we all know, because a lot of us have worked hard on this, and the staff has certainly worked very hard. The town of Mount Pleasant, especially the Old Village, which is going to be most affected by this particular issue and enhanced and greatly helped, has been probably wondering for a long time, why don't you fix the problem? It's been a bad problem for a long time. And I just want to reiterate for a second, a couple years ago, we were given the possibility of raising our stormwater fee in order to issue $20 million worth of bonds to fix the Old Village drainage problem. And had we moved forward at that time, it was either voted down or we actually never ended up making a motion. I can't remember the details now, but I do remember the fact that it was what we call a regressive tax. It was a tax where everybody pays the same, no matter how big their property is, no matter what their impact, no matter what their runoff or anything. And so we said, no, we need to figure out a way that's more fair. We need to figure out a way that makes more sense. In the meantime, as various other things happened, including rises in property values in Mount Pleasant, and I will reiterate, we actually lowered, or we ended up with a lower millage rate, and that's not true for most of our neighbors. But on that note, we actually ended up by postponing that decision at the time until the permits were ready. The permits were only ready a couple months ago. We couldn't, if we had voted on that 2 years ago, our taxpayers would have been on the hook for the interest on those bonds for nearly 2 years, at least a good year and a half. I think that's important for people to note. You might say, well, what does that matter? Well, even at only 3 or 3.5%, you can do the math pretty quickly in your head on $20 million. We probably saved our town nearly $1.5 million, our taxpayers nearly $1.5 million in interest, but certainly at least $1 million. So this is the great time to do it. This is the money that we need to get the project going, and I just want to thank everybody for all their diligence and patience on this.
All right. The motion is to approve. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
First reading, ordinance number 21004.
Item number 6 authorizes the granting of a perpetual easement to Mount Pleasant Waterworks relative to the Thomasina Stokes Marshall Senior Center.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
First reading, ordinance number 21005.
Thank you all very much. Number 7, an ordinance authorizing a conveyance by deed of surplus right-of-way totaling .14 acres to Patriots Point. We went over this before. This is a little eyebrow of property, and it will enable the Medal of Honor Museum.
Move for approval.
Second.
A motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Motion passes.
First reading, ordinance number 21006.
Item number 8, discussion and possible action with regard to town ordinance title, Chapter 41, Civil Emergencies. Ms. Lanning, I believe you put this on the agenda. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason that I had asked to have this on our agenda, it actually went through committee, through the Police, Judicial, and Legal Committee last month, and there were several of us that had asked for, at least two, that had wanted it to go to committee to be considered. Civil Emergencies, Chapter 41, which I have in front of me, is the one that deals with any kind of emergency, including the one that we're in right now, the state of emergency that was declared by the governor with COVID and all the way back in March last year. And I wanted to bring this up tonight for the whole council just to take a look, because in that meeting last month, and part of my purpose at the time was, and part of the other person's purpose was to take a look at when you have unilateral emergency powers by our mayor, who, by the way, has done a great job of restraining and often respecting the council's will, even when it wasn't the same as his on that. So that is not the reason I brought this up. But a couple of the comments in the public comments on that committee were, for instance, a mayoral proclamation extending the mask ordinance. Now, there were a lot of folks that thought that was a really good way to handle it at the time because it was likely to pass 5-4. That's how it had been in other meetings. But one of the things that came back from a lot of folks in the public was, by having a proclamation, we didn't have any public input. So regardless of what all of us, which would say probably the same thing we said the last time, we did not have the public input, and that was one of the concerns that a lot of folks had. Another person who was one of our current council members had said that in emergency situations, a quorum of council members should be responsible for making emergency decisions when possible. So why do we have a civil emergencies ordinance on the books? And I won't spend a lot of your time on this, but I do want to say there are times where something comes up very suddenly, such as when this first hit us. It is still a state of emergency, but we are at a point now where we've done a lot of things to cope, such as we have already been having virtual meetings. We have already passed the ability as council to be able to quickly gather in an emergency meeting through virtual means if necessary. So if something comes up regarding the situation we're in now, we have the means as a group to be able to meet, discuss it, and also allow for public input on decisions. And one other point on what happened at that committee, because I actually thought because it went to committee, it would probably be at least passed on, whether they wanted to take action or not, they would pass it on to council to discuss. But instead, the decision that it really wasn't a decision at all, it was more of a comment by a council member on the committee, that after COVID-19 passes, the council should review Chapter 41 because there are sections of the ordinance that need to be reviewed and potentially revised. We don't know how long it will take for COVID-19 to pass. We know we have a vaccine now. We're all very excited about that. Hopefully, we will see something really break through this year and see our numbers come way, way down and perhaps even end this crisis. But in the meantime, there are things that just simply probably shouldn't be the purview of one person, especially in, and again, this is not out of disrespect.
I do need to ask, there's either a motion or not.
There will be, but the reason the discussion is important is because there's only a motion necessary if people understand why I even brought it to council. So an existence of an emergency is when you have to take action very, very quickly. And Chapter 41 of the code actually says, a state of emergency shall be deemed to exist when during a great public crisis, which we do have, disaster, rioting, catastrophe, or similar public civil emergency, municipal public safety authorities are unable to maintain public order or afford adequate protection for lives or property. And I think there's at least a few of us on council that believe at this point we have a strong council system, and it has to go to a referendum to the public if we're not going to have a strong council system. So right now, I believe what we should do is, instead of waiting till COVID passes, whenever that is, we should potentially, which is why I'd like to make a motion to that effect, we should ask our staff to go back now and look at this civil ordinance for emergencies, Chapter 41, and put a time limit on the powers of being able to make decisions without having the full council be back in on the discussion. And I think that's a very reasonable thing. I don't know what that limit should be. 30 days is certainly too short, probably. 60 might, they could take a look at that. It is also important that you know, there are a number of items in here that are actually authorized in such a state of emergency that really would probably cause a lot of concern if we went through them tonight, and I'm not going to do that because I'm not here to stir up trouble. I simply think we should do something sooner rather than later to look at how this emergency power is. So my motion is that we direct staff to take a look at this now and determine if there is some amendment that can be made to Chapter 41 Civil Emergencies that we would limit the time period. I don't think when this was set up, they expected an emergency to last almost a year.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I'll start off discussion since, one, I occupy this position currently, and two, since it came before our committee. It was also said by members of the committee, which is 4 of us, which is almost a majority of council, that amending emergency powers in the course of an emergency was probably not the course we wanted to go. We're happy to bring this back to the committee to look at these things, but putting a time limit on it, certainly, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, is on the committee. I don't remember that being discussed at the committee. So we would certainly like a chance for it to come back to the committee. We're in the middle of working on this, and we respect other committees when something is remanded to you to do your work, and I think the police, judicial, and legal would appreciate the same deference from the other members of this council.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to ask Mr. Pagliarini a question. Under the emergency, Chapter 41, if a decision was made that the council disagreed with, the council by simple majority could overturn that decision. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
So anything listed under the Chapter 41 civil emergencies, should the council disagree with it, we could call a meeting and overturn it?
Yes, ma'am, that provision is fairly broad. It can end a state of emergency if declared at a local level, or all or any part of the restriction imposed, so it covers a significant amount of ground.
So given that provision that exists in the civil emergencies, I don't feel that there's too much power resting with the position of mayor, because anything the mayor does can easily be overturned. I guess almost I feel like Ms. Landing wants to flip it and move it so where the council makes the decision rather than the mayor. But I think in an emergency situation, which we are still currently in, and even given the presentation that was given tonight, we are entering a new phase of this emergency. I think that putting a time limit on something, I mean, we know that a hurricane is going to be a limited period of time, but something like this, I mean, I would appreciate, I think, as well, an opportunity for this to be discussed further, either, I guess we could discuss it now since it's already before us, but at PJ&L. But I think that given that there's a provision in Chapter 41 that enables council to at any time overturn the unilateral decision of the mayor, I feel comfortable that honors our strong council system.
Let me ask Mr. Pagliarini a legal question. Based on your advice to me, having been the one that had to exercise this in this unprecedented emergency, what is the legal threshold for what constitutes an emergency in the first place, and have those, in your opinion, been met?
First of all, sir, I think any number of things could be an emergency. The ordinance is quite broad in that respect. In current circumstances, at the beginning, there was a state of emergency declared at the town level. Of course, since the governor has weighed in, we have had a constant state of emergency for really almost 9 months. So that, in my opinion, and I think it's fairly clear in the ordinance, that a declared state of emergency, any actions thereafter, as long as they're within the parameters of the ordinance, would be sufficient. Mayor, I don't believe there's any doubt that that baseline has been met during this process.
Okay. Ms. Lanning?
The important distinction here is not how particular decisions made by our mayor or in the emergency, whether they could be overturned or not. Because we know that in this particular case, the one decision that was made as a proclamation was related to the mask ordinance, and that's not what we're here to debate tonight. The issue is that the public was left out of the process. Even if we know for a fact that if we were to meet afterwards to try to overturn it, it would still be 5-4, which would mean it would still end up staying. And that's just one example. But the important thing is that the public is left out of the process when you have a proclamation, whereas a decision or a discussion or a motion by council, there's always going to be an opportunity for public comment. So that is one of the reasons I think we should have this looked at now. And another one is that we've had a couple of things where there were differences of opinion that were relatively strong enough to make statements to the public through the press, strong enough to schedule events that a lot of us would have liked to have participated in to help our community, specifically at a time when another event was going on. I'm not going to go into details or cause an uproar about it. I'm just saying that's an example where a proclamation could have been made. It wasn't, and I appreciate that it wasn't, but it could have been, and it would have been very hard for us as a group to regroup at that point. So I think the issue here comes down to, do we have something that at this point we as a council have an awful lot of data and information to manage and help make decisions about, and do we have an unusual circumstance here where we now need to take a closer look now rather than waiting until the end of COVID? COVID may never completely go away. I mean, we live with a lot of things on a regular basis, so, but hopefully it will this year.
Mr. O'Rourke.
Ms. Lanning, is your motion to send it back to a committee?
My motion is for us to, which was seconded, is for the staff to consider options to limit the civil emergency power of proclamations and so forth when a time period has expanded.
And when they complete that work, where does it go?
It would then have to go to committee, yes.
Which one? Police, legal, judicial?
I don't know if it has to go to one. I think probably there might be whatever might come out of that work by staff.
The only reason I say
maybe
that-
several. I would say economic development, because a good example would be, what if we're seeing some things across the state and suddenly there's the potential for a lockdown? So,
Okay.
So I don't know that we have to name the committees tonight.
But I think if that motion is going to be made for the benefit of staff, we should make it clear to them where it's going to end up. Which leads me to, okay, I think if we were to ask everybody which committee it comes back to, we may get different answers. You said economic development, not sure about that.
No, I mean,
but I will say
so-
this. So who gets to decide what's an emergency? Can you pick an emergency? Or is it mayor's emergency? So, and I don't mean to do the work that your motion says to do right now, but I don't think this is quick, actually. I think this is staff doing work, very, very busy staff doing work, and then coming back in committees, and then discussions, and then something presented to council, and then action. So this is not going to be tomorrow.
I was not thinking it should be tomorrow.
Okay.
I just think it needs to be addressed.
Yes, okay.
I just have a question.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Corley.
So when would we,
You need to do a mic.
is it off?
I don't think so. There you go.
When would we, who dictates when we come out of the emergency? How does that happen? Like,
I'll let
who
legal.
dictates when the emergency is over?
I believe there would be three examples of that, perhaps. As, for example, using the current situation, that would be the governor. I guess there'd be four, the governor. I assume also that the state legislature could, in certain circumstances. If the emergency were declared at the town level, it would be the mayor. And as Ms. Whitley referenced, the portion of the ordinance before council could do that as well. So
that makes sense that the governor would, to me, it makes sense that the governor would have those powers because he is the governor. But when it comes to us, like, at what point, what were you thinking? Like how long were you thinking this would go on?
Council has always had the authority for 3 members to call a meeting and take all of it off, the whole proclamation off or parts of it. That has not happened. Since we've all been through this together. We came close and we considered when we had the bridge crisis in 2018, wondering was that an emergency? We decided it was not. I guess something like that could pop up, and it would. But from the first meeting we had in March, what was it, first week of March, legal started talking with me, shared it with all of council that this is what we're probably headed for. Council from the start has total veto power over every aspect of that, including the timing, already has it. So I feel, in my opinion, we're debating something that council already has. Y'all could, 3 members could call a meeting tomorrow and stop all of it.
I guess my question was, how do you feel about it? So what are we getting from this? What problem are we solving, I guess? Does that make sense?
Yes. Well, I can tell you one thing, whether it was a stay-at-home order in March or the mask ordinance, I have never done it without knowing that the majority of this council absolutely supported it. I've never done it without the support of the majority of council. And so when I hear, I said the majority of council. So when I hear council members asking me to use it, including Ms. Landing, who made the motion, asked me to use it back in the summer, rather than have a public debate, I used it. So, and I know too that there's an absolute check on the person who has this position, that this council could tomorrow call a meeting and undo the whole thing. So listening to council and then seeing that our state is still in a state of emergency, I think that's, our level and the higher level that we are dealing with an emergency.
So you still feel like it would be for the better of the town that we continue to do this? Like you feel like there's
for the moment, and that can change. And the beauty of Chapter 41, which in itself was an act of council, no mayor previously just wrote that and gave himself that power, is that it can be altered tomorrow without meeting, without bringing staff in, without all the requirements of having a meeting. And the other thing is, I think if you've been through a hurricane or if you saw what happened in our nation's capital the other day, especially things like curfews when there's civil unrest, if we had to call a meeting, get a quorum, have a clerk, have legal, town administrator, police, and everything have a place to meet, that defeats the purpose of taking care of public safety. And that happened right across the river when a riot, broke out without any warning. And I know from having gone through that too with the police that the ability to pronounce a curfew almost immediately is a huge legal tool for them if they're dealing with unrest. So, you got no argument from me. I mean, I didn't sign up to use emergency powers. I never thought I would have to unless we had something like a hurricane. But I would certainly ask, this is obviously a legal issue. We have 4 members. We expanded the committee of a police, judicial, and legal committee, and I would ask that anything we do, please bring it back to the committee that is formed to handle those things.
And then what would happen?
You still have the floor.
So then what would happen after that? So you guys would take it back to committee, and then it would come back to us with some sort of resolution?
Yeah. Yes, it would. There are things in there that I guess it was written 30 years ago. Who knows how long I will be mayor of this town, but I can't see using those powers to limit anything that has to do with firearms or anything like that. I guess if there was an invasion or something, I don't know. But there are things in there I'll be glad to have this committee and council take a look at.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you talked to the quorum of council, but there are those of us who you didn't talk to, and we had no idea you were doing a proclamation until we read it in the paper. I think with us being a weak council, strong mayor system, that we all should know what's going on. We all should have a say in what happens, and then whether we call it an emergency meeting and we have a vote of council to do it. I think for me, I feel more comfortable because we're all elected by the same citizens, and our citizens expect all of us to have a say in what goes on with the town. And when things happen and we don't even know about it till we read it in the paper, it's kind of embarrassing.
Let me take exception to that real quick. I don't know if you read your emails, but I have never done a resolution that y'all did not get by email before it was done.
Well, I mean, I don't carry my laptop around with me everywhere I go. I do have a job, and I do check it periodically for sure, and on my phone as well. But apparently, I did not see that one. So my whole thing was you apparently contacted some people. You've got 5 votes, or 5 people that you've talked to apparently, which is great. I'm not saying what you did was wrong. I'm just saying I didn't know it until I read it in the paper. And the key is, I think since we're all elected by the same citizens to make decisions, that we all ought to have an opportunity to vote on any type of emergency issue. And as was stated, that, you could do it either virtually or you could do it in person. But I think everybody wants to be a part of it. Everybody wants to be a part of these decisions. And that's the way I think our council should work. So I have no problem sending it back to the Police, Judicial, and Legal Committee. If that's what y'all want to do, that's fine. It gives us an opportunity to discuss it further and then bring it back to council. I don't, but I think you know how some of us feel about this. I want to give the power back to the full council to make these decisions and not have to come back after a decision's made and bring it back up again and then argue about, I think we ought to be able to vote on it and move on quickly, because that's what our citizens want us to do.
Any other comments? Yes, ma'am. Last comment, and then we're going to vote.
Yes, I have one last comment. Again, there's nothing personal about this. This is professional, and we're talking about something that has been going on for 10 months, and while we are still in a state of emergency, we do know how to deal with it. We have all been doing the CDC guidelines. We have all been wearing masks. We have all been distancing. And right now, we are in a situation where we'll come up on another 61-day or 60-day ordinance that ends. And if we have a proclamation by the mayor again, which will come up before there would be time for staff to review, present it to committee, and then have it come to council. So it's going to come up before then. If we have another proclamation, that negates, we may be able to meet the next day to overturn it, but if it's 5-4, that's not going to happen. But what will happen is the public will not be able to have input. And the public across this country is being more and more and more shut down. And we are seeing more and more elected officials who are grabbing more and more power. And I'm not saying that's what's happening here, but I think the best way to avoid that happening is to simply say, let's have the staff take a look based on the motion that we made that was seconded, and if we vote on that, they can then send it to the appropriate committees. PJNL certainly would be one, but it needs to then come to council. That's what didn't happen last month. Last month, it did not come to council. We should have had this conversation last month, I believe. And by the way, there are some things, the mayor is right. There are some things in here that would really upset the public if they knew that the mayor has power over those in emergencies. So I think it should be looked at now, not months from now.
All right, we have a motion, which is not to send it to the committee. The motion says to have staff put time limits on proclamations in Chapter 41.
That's not my motion.
Well,
My
please
motion-
read it again.
All right, I didn't read it, I'm saying it. My motion is to have the staff take a look at the civil emergency, Chapter 41, to consider opportunities ways to curtail the power, perhaps for limited periods of time, depending on the status of the emergency involved.
Does that include
I did not
sending it
hear
to
anything
committee?
about the committee.
And, all right, and then send it to committee.
To the Police, Judicial, and Legal Committee?
I was told we didn't have to say that in the ordinance. I asked about that question. So for staff to first consider what changes could be made, and then various committees, including PJ&L, would have an opportunity to review it before it would come back to council.
Yeah,
Legal?
Mayor, position on that is, obviously, council can dictate and vote as to whatever committee they want. I wouldn't propose then to take away the authority of the various committee chairs to put whatever they'd like on their individual agendas either, so that would be the full explanation.
If you need an example of why that's important, a good example would be and again, not saying you would ever do this, Mayor, but we do have mayors across the country that are imposing lockdowns again right now It literally just happened the other day in a community that we know about that, there's a question mark about whether it was needed and it didn't have to go to council. And so I think that's an example where economic development would want to be able to look at it.
Any other comments? Yes, sir, Ms. Chapman.
Mayor, I haven't spoken on this issue. I'm listening. I'm trying to understand what the issues are. I think the way that the motion has been made puts the staff in a very untenable position because they got to guess what council members want in and what council members want out. Whereas if it goes to a specific committee like PJ&L, which does the legal work with our attorney, then the information that the committee thinks should be changed can then be given to staff, and staff will have direction on what to prepare. Otherwise, they're kind of in an untenable position, just having to guess what council wants. So I just throw that out there, and that I will not vote on the motion the way it's been made. I'd vote to go to committee and have members of council give the staff direction to come back with something, but not just to give them carte blanche to guess what we want.
All right, so everyone knows the motion. A yes vote is to affirm that motion. I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
And you will not allow any other discussion? I
Ma'am?
had one more comment because of what was said.
Does anyone else have a comment? They would be entitled to comment first. Mr. Rambo.
So I have not commented yet, but I just echo a couple of, I kind of see where you're going, Ms. Landing. Yeah, I do think the motion is a little bit, I'm still not sure. It almost sounds like staff's going to make a presentation to the committee, basically, so it's kind of going back to committee, but there was a lot of words, and I'm just confused. I'm just a little bit confused. I'm sorry.
All right. If I could say one more thing then. If this goes back to the same committee that refused to spend any time other than a few, it was clear that the decision was from those 4 people that, including the mayor who is the chairman of that committee, that we should wait till after COVID-19 passes to even look at this. And I don't think that's what should happen. It seems to me that this has enough things with the civil emergencies mentioned, the civil emergency and Chapter 41 powers that are vested to the mayor under this circumstance. There are too many things that he could do unilaterally without input from us. And yes, we could meet the next day to overturn, but the public is left out of that if there's a proclamation. And also, it is harder for us to come back afterwards. So maybe the motion needs to be changed a little bit. Maybe I am not being clear enough.
The motion is on the floor. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Whitley.
I really appreciate Ms. Landing's concerns, and as a member of the PJ&L committee, and having been at that meeting and where we kind of came to the conclusion that this is something that could wait, I can see from Ms. Landing's concerns and then the discussion of the rest of the council that this is something that cannot wait. And so I'm happy to have it come back to our committee and take this up and take the ball and run with it and bring it back to council in a timely fashion rather than wait. So that's just where. So I don't know, I'm with Mr. Rambo, I don't quite understand the motion, so I'm if I vote in favor of it, is that coming back to PJ&L? If I vote against it, but I think hearing Ms. Landing's concerns, I agree that this is something that we should take up sooner rather than later and bring it before full council for a fulsome discussion and decision.
Mr. Rambo.
Just throwing this out there, instead of, and I am on the PLJ committee, but, there's only 4 of us, and the 4 of us could think one thing, and all 5 other council members think something totally different, and so committee work can end up getting totally switched around. So since we have discussed it in PLJ, I don't know, I almost feel like instead of it going back to PLJ committee, we could have almost a committee of the whole on the next committee day where all 9 people can discuss this, but I don't know, just a thought.
As the chair, I have to say, we have a motion on the floor. and it does not send it back to the PJL committee.
Oh,
The motion does not specifically send it back to the PJL committee. Will the clerk please call the roll?
I'm willing to change the motion if we want to do that. I'm willing to withdraw it and change the motion.
Let us vote it down.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So we can go by the rules.
Oh, all right.
All
You
right.
can't withdraw the motion?
I'll ask the parliamentarian.
Sir, there is a motion on the floor. If the chair would allow, the motion could be withdrawn and the second be withdrawn if the chair would allow that.
Is that your intention, to withdraw the motion?
And change, yes.
Okay. The motion, the second was Ms. Santos. Will you withdraw the second? Okay, so the motion and the second have been withdrawn, so we don't have a motion on the floor.
I would like to make a motion that we have the Chapter 41 Civil Emergencies Ordinance reviewed in the PJNL Committee next month in a timely manner in order to review the possibility of changes now, rather than waiting until this particular emergency ends.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and we have a second.
Second.
I don't think there'll be any discussion. We prepared to vote? All right, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. This moves us to item B, old business, final reading, an ordinance to amend.
motion to approve.
This is
Second.
We have a motion and a second. This is our watercraft ordinance that strengthens it and keeps us from having derelict boats that are desecrating our marshes and our navigable channels. We have a motion and a second. Motion is to approve. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
Final reading, ordinance number 20071.
Item C is executive session for the reasons of personnel consideration.
Motion to go into executive session.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and the reasons would be, if this vote is successful, applications to serve on the Planning Commission, applications to serve on the Historical Commission, applications to serve on the Historic District Preservation Commission, formerly known as the Old Village Historic District. And I will say before we vote that upon reconvening, council may take action on any item, including any subsection of any section listed on an executive session agenda or discussed in an executive session during a properly noticed meeting. All in favor of entering executive session for the reasons stated, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We will go into executive session.